She thought she was just going to a dream interview, but when the office door opened and her mother walked in uninvited, smiling as if it were her show, Alice's entire life fell apart in a matter of minutes. That day, she lost her peace, her control, and the illusion that a mother's love was caring. And it was from that moment that her most terrifying yet most liberating fight began. Not for her job, but for her own life, her freedom, and the right to be herself. This is a story about how help can become a trap, and how motherly love can become the most dangerous control in the world. I'm Elise, 27 years old, female, and I swear my mother could ruin oxygen if she decided it wasn't pure enough for me. When I was little, her love felt like protection. She'd call it taking care of things. If a teacher upset me, she'd march into school, red lipstick and rage, like she was storming a battlefield. Once, I got a B+ on a science project I actually worked hard on. She called my teacher in front of me, voice calm but sharp as glass. "You don't understand the effort Elise put in. Clearly, you didn't read the report carefully." 40 minutes later, the grade was magically changed to an A. I remember watching it happen, the power of her voice, and feeling both proud and sick. Back then, I didn't know what boundaries were. I thought her interference was normal, even love. She'd say, "You're my only child, Elise. If I don't fight for you, who will?" But what she really meant was, if I'm not controlling you, I don't exist. By high school, I started realizing how off it all was. She read my texts, logged into my Facebook, accidentally overheard phone calls. Once, when I mentioned a crush on a boy from theater club, she tracked down his mom on Facebook and messaged her, "Maybe our kids could get coffee together?" When the mom politely declined, mine lost it. "You think your son's too good for my daughter?" she wrote, adding insults that still make me cringe when I think about them. The next day at school, everyone whispered. By lunch, crazy Mom Elise was trending in group chats. From that day, something cracked between us. I started hiding things, my grades, my plans, my thoughts. But hiding from her was like hiding from air. She seeped into everything. She'd find my emails, fix my essays, rewrite my college applications behind my back. When I didn't get into my first choice university, she blamed me for not following her edits. "If you just trusted me, you'd be somewhere better." College was my first real escape. Or I thought it would be. She'd visit unannounced, tidy my dorm, interrogate my friends, check my laundry for evidence of bad decisions. I still remember one night vividly. She found a half-empty bottle of wine under my bed, one I'd barely touched. She smashed it in the sink, while yelling that I was throwing my future away. I stood frozen, watching the red swirl down the drain, realizing how easily she could destroy anything, even something that wasn't really broken. By the time I graduated, she taught me one thing perfectly: how to live in fear of her love. After college, I thought maybe distance would finally loosen her grip. I moved 3 states away, rented a small studio, and told her I'd be too busy with my new job search to talk much. She cried on the phone, those deep, dramatic sobs she knew would crush me, but I stood my ground.
Hey guys, real quick before we keep going, don't forget to sub and drop a like if you're enjoying the story. Thank you very much. Enjoy watching.
"I just need space, Mom," I said. She sniffed, paused, and whispered, "You'll regret pushing me away when the world turns on you." For a while, it almost felt peaceful. I got a temp job at a marketing firm and started sending out applications for permanent positions. But peace in my mother's world is just the silence before the next invasion. One afternoon, I opened my laptop and found my resume already open. Only it wasn't the version I'd written. She'd somehow gotten into my Google Drive. She'd rewritten it completely. Guaut pirab, et puis, inflated job titles, made up skills, and under references, she'd put contact Patricia Dawson, proud mother and lifelong mentor, my mother, as a reference. When I called her, shaking with anger, she acted offended. "I was helping, Elise. Do you want to look unprepared? You always sabotage yourself. You should thank me." That night, I changed every password, but a few days later, she texted me, "Why'd you lock me out of your accounts?" The fact she even noticed terrified me. I started getting weird replies from companies I hadn't contacted yet. One recruiter mentioned my follow-up calls. I'd made none. When I pressed him, he said, "Your mother called us twice last week. She said she was your manager." I hung up before I cried. That was her pattern. If I didn't let her in, she'd kick the door open anyway. I confronted her again, voice trembling but firm. "You need to stop contacting people about my job applications," she laughed. "You'd still be in diapers if it weren't for me doing things for you." A few weeks later, I landed an interview for a dream position, junior marketing associate at a major firm downtown, the kind of job that could change everything. I didn't tell her. I told her I was meeting a friend for brunch that morning. I even parked 2 blocks away from the office, in case she somehow tracked my location. The interview started beautifully. The director, Olivia, was sharp but kind, and I felt confident until the door opened behind me. I didn't even have to turn around. I recognized the sound of her heels, the perfume she wore, like a warning. My mother walked straight in, smiled at Olivia, and said, "Don't mind me, I'm just here to support my daughter." My stomach dropped. Every nightmare I'd ever had about her. It was happening in real time, right there in front of my future. For a second, nobody moved. Olivia just blinked at my mother like she couldn't process what was happening. My mom sat down in the empty chair next to me, folded her hands neatly, and smiled like she'd been invited. Go ahead, she said. I just want to see how my girl does under pressure. My throat went dry. Mom, leave. She waved a hand. Don't be dramatic. You always get nervous. I'm just here for moral support. Olivia tried to recover her professional tone, asking me to describe my experience in brand outreach. I opened my mouth, and my mother interrupted before I could get a single word out. She led her entire college marketing team, she lied smoothly. They won multiple awards. Tell her, Elise. Olivia's eyebrows lifted. I stammered something vague, praying it would end soon, but my mom wouldn't stop. She corrected my answers, criticized the phrasing of Olivia's questions, even offered unsolicited feedback on the company's branding. Frankly, I'd expect more originality from a director-level position, she said with that same smug smile. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. The air in the room was heavy, suffocating. Olivia glanced at me, not with judgment but pity. That was somehow worse. When I finally snapped, it wasn't loud, just firm. Mom, you need to go, right now. Her head whipped toward me like I'd just slapped her. Excuse me? Don't speak to me that way, she hissed. Oh, I am your mother. You're embarrassing yourself. Olivia stood then. No, she said sharply. You're embarrassing her. This interview is over. That's when my mom lost it. She stood too, voice rising to a shout. You think you can talk to me like that? I raised her better than this. You're unprofessional, both of you. Security arrived within minutes. My mother fought them, clawed at the doorframe, screamed that this was discrimination, that she was being assaulted. I couldn't even move. I just sat there frozen while they dragged her out, her voice echoing down the hallway. When the door finally shut, I started shaking. Olivia looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, That was a lot. I nodded, my hands trembling. I'm so sorry. I didn't tell her. I swear, I didn't. She held up a hand. Elise, stop apologizing. I saw what happened. She exhaled, rubbed her temples, and said, You were doing great before that. I'm not going to let your mother's behavior define you. If you can handle that with composure, you can handle anything on this team. By the time I got home, my phone was already exploding with her messages. Half were apologies. I was just trying to help, and half were rage. You humiliated me in front of everyone. That night, she was arrested for trespassing and disorderly conduct, and somehow, even from a holding cell, she managed to make it about me. The call came the next morning from an unknown number. It was the police asking me to confirm my relationship to Patricia Dawson. My mother. The words felt foreign in my mouth when I said them. She's my mother, I whispered. The officer explained that she'd been charged with trespassing and resisting removal after the incident at the marketing firm. My chest tightened. I thanked him, hung up, and sat on the floor of my apartment because standing suddenly felt impossible. That should have been the end of it. A humiliating, messy chapter closed. But if there's one thing my mother can't stand, it's losing control. A week later, Olivia called. Elise, she said gently, I don't want you to panic, but your mother's lawyer contacted our HR department. My vision blurred for a second. He's claiming we mishandled the situation, that there was no reason for security to remove her. He's threatening to file harassment and defamation charges against you and the company. I actually laughed. A sharp, hollow sound. She got arrested in my interview, Olivia. How is that my fault? Olivia sighed. We know it's not. But we have to go through the motions. HR will cooperate with the police, and you might need to give a statement. Just be prepared. When I walked into the courthouse for the preliminary hearing 2 weeks later, I convinced myself it would be routine. She'd plead guilty, pay a fine, and maybe finally leave me alone. I was so naive. Her attorney was waiting for me in the hallway, a slick man in a gray suit with an oily smile. Miss Dawson, I'm representing your mother. Do you have a moment? He gestured toward a side room. Against my better judgment, I followed. Inside, he laid out neatly printed pages across the table. Texts, emails, screenshots. All between me and my mother. Every time I'd written things like, Can you check my resume? Or, I'm nervous about my interview. He'd highlighted them in yellow like damning evidence. She's simply a devoted parent, he said. Your history shows you consistently sought her input. The interview incident was just an extension of that support. I could barely breathe. That's not what happened. I asked for advice, not... He cut me off. Intent doesn't matter, Miss Dawson. Context does. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely grab my phone to text Olivia. Within 10 minutes, a prosecutor named Violet Garza appeared. Sharp suit, colder expression. She listened to everything, then turned to the lawyer and said, This conversation is over. You don't ambush victims before testimony. Then she turned to me, softer. Elise, your mother's behavior wasn't help. It was coercion. We're going to show that. For the first time in my life, someone in authority believed me. And that scared me even more, because it meant everything I'd been downplaying for years was finally real. Violet moved fast after that day. She told me we needed to build a full picture, not just the interview disaster, but the entire history of my mother's interference. The court needs to see a pattern, Elise. Otherwise, it'll look like a one-time overstep, she explained. So I sat in her office surrounded by legal pads and boxes of tissues, reliving every violation I'd buried. The playground fight when I was 10, the teacher calls, the rewritten essays, the hacked resume, the phone calls to HR. As I spoke, Violet wrote quick, precise notes. Every word felt like picking glass out of my skin. When I finished, she asked me something simple that broke me. Why didn't you just tell her no? I tried to answer, but my throat locked up, because saying no to my mother never worked. She'd cry, rage, or break something, anything to make me take it back. Once in college, I told her I needed space and hung up mid-argument. 10 minutes later, she'd Venmo'd my roommate $100 for groceries and attached a message that said, "Tell Elise I'll always take care of her even when she's cruel." That's what no cost me. Peace, privacy, friendships. So I stopped trying. Violet leaned forward. "Elise, that's coercive control. It's not just toxic, but it's criminal when it escalates to trespassing or harassment. You didn't overreact. You survived." Hearing that cracked something open in me. All these years, I'd thought I was just weak. Now someone was telling me it was abuse. That night, I went home and started digging through old emails to help Violet build evidence. I found messages where I begged my mom not to call my boss, ones where she accused me of being ungrateful for wanting independence. I found the proof of everything, the pattern, the suffocating cycle, right there in my inbox. Then I noticed something else. My email account had logins from her city, times when I hadn't even been near a computer. I checked the IP addresses, and my stomach turned. She'd been inside my account for years, reading everything. That's how she knew about the job interview I never told her about. I took screenshots and sent them to Violet immediately. She called back within the hour. "This is bigger than we thought," she said. "Unauthorized access, identity misuse. This is serious." She told me to lock everything down, change passwords, enable two-factor authentication, remove my mother from every emergency contact list. It took all night. Each password change felt like cutting another thread she'd tied around my life. For the first time ever, I realized she hadn't just controlled me. She'd been monitoring me, watching my every move like she owned it. And that's when something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about defense anymore. I was done hiding, done apologizing. If my mother wanted to weaponize my past to prove I needed her, fine. I'd weaponize the truth to prove I didn't. The next morning, Violet called again. "We'll use those logins to establish a pattern of intrusion," she said. "But Elise, I also want you to start documenting everything from this point forward. Calls, texts, unexpected visits, even sightings. Anything that suggests she's still trying to breach contact." It sounded paranoid, but she was right. Because my mother didn't just stop. That weekend, the concierge at my building, Roman, called to say a woman matching her description had come by asking which apartment I lived in. When the staff refused to answer, she'd yelled, accused them of hiding me, and finally stormed off. Roman wrote an incident report and forwarded it to me. I sent it straight to Violet. Then on Monday, Milo from HR called. My stomach dropped before he even spoke. "Elise, your mother phoned the office on Friday afternoon," he said carefully. "She claimed there was a family emergency and demanded to be transferred to you. Reception followed protocol. They didn't confirm you work here. We documented everything." I could barely breathe. "Thank you," I whispered. "Please just don't tell her anything. Ever." When I hung up, the shaking started again. Every time I thought she couldn't find a new way to invade my life, she did. Violet arranged a referral to a therapist, Heather Garza, no relation to her, someone who specialized in boundary trauma. Heather was calm, mid-50s, with the kind of steady presence that made silence feel safe. She asked me to describe my relationship with my mother without using the word love. I couldn't. My throat closed up. I started talking about guilt instead, the constant need to please her, the fear of her disapproval, how even now I felt wrong for protecting myself. Heather listened quietly, then said, "That's called enmeshment. It's when a parent treats a child as an extension of themselves. You were never allowed to be your own person." She gave me homework. Write down every moment this week when I felt responsible for my mother's emotions, every time I caught myself thinking about what she would say, about something I did. I filled 2 pages in 3 days. At work, Olivia gave me a new project, leading a product launch campaign, my first major responsibility since the interview incident. The idea thrilled me, until I caught myself reaching for my phone to text my mom for advice. I froze mid-reach. That's when Heather's words echoed in my head. "You were never allowed to trust yourself." So I forced my hand away, took a deep breath, and decided to figure it out on my own. That campaign became my quiet rebellion. Every slide, every decision, every late-night draft was proof that I could exist without her voice in my head. But my mother wasn't done fighting for control. She never just vanished quietly. And when she realized she couldn't reach me directly anymore, she found a darker way to make me hear her. It started with a letter. Roman found it tucked under the lobby desk a week before the next hearing. Flowery stationery, pink ink, my full name written in her perfect cursive. He held it up like it was a bomb. "She dropped this off in person," he said quietly. Didn't say a word. Just left. I took it upstairs, locked my door, and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the envelope for 10 minutes before opening it. 3 pages, both sides. At first it read like an apology. "I went too far at your interview. I just wanted you to succeed." But halfway through, the tone shifted. She wrote that I had turned everyone against her, that I'd humiliated her by letting her get arrested. She wrote that I was brainwashed by strangers who don't know family loyalty. By the last paragraph, she was begging, We can fix this, Elise. We don't need lawyers. We need each other. It ended with, I love you, but you've broken my heart. I folded it carefully and drove straight to Heather's office. She read it silently, then said, This isn't an apology, it's manipulation. She's shifting blame, not taking responsibility. Heather told me to write a response, not to send, but to finally say what I'd never said. So that night, I wrote 6 pages of raw, shaking truth. I wrote about every time she'd humiliated me, every moment I'd been afraid of her anger. I wrote, You don't get to call it love when it feels like being owned. When I finished, my hands hurt from gripping the pen so tightly. But for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. The next morning was the hearing. Violet met me outside the courthouse, calm as ever, and said the defense had requested another recess to discuss a plea. In the conference room, my mother sat with her lawyer, smaller, older, her hands trembling. She wouldn't look at me. Her lawyer offered a deal. She'd plead guilty to trespassing, accept probation and counseling, but I'd have to drop any civil claims and agree not to file for a restraining order. Violet glanced at me, waiting. Every old reflex screamed at me to say yes, to smooth things over, to stop the conflict, but then I thought about that letter, about the years of intrusion, about waking up terrified that she'd be standing at my door. No, I said. Not unless there's a no-contact order, workplace included. The lawyer's smile faded. That's unnecessary between family. Exactly, I said. And that's the problem. He looked irritated, but before he could argue, the judge passed by the doorway and overheard. He said if we couldn't agree, we'd go to testimony. On record. 5 minutes later, her lawyer returned pale and flustered. My client accepts the full terms. When I heard it, those words, full terms accepted, something in my chest unclenched for the first time in my entire life. She pleaded guilty. The judge granted the no-contact order. No calls, no visits, no messages, except through attorneys, and only after her therapist approved the content. As we left the courtroom, she tried to call my name. Violet stepped between us. Ma'am, that's a violation. My mother froze, tears spilling. I just wanted to say I love you. I walked past her without looking back, because love shouldn't feel like fear, and I was done confusing the two. The first thing I noticed after the court order went into effect was the silence. No phone calls at midnight, no guilt-soaked texts, no surprise knocks at my door. Just quiet. For the first time, my life didn't feel like a hostage situation. Milo from HR called me in to review security protocols. My mother's photo was at reception, with clear instructions that she wasn't allowed inside. Any calls from her would be documented, then reported. When I left his office, I almost cried, not because I was sad, but because someone was finally helping me, instead of doubting me. At work, Olivia stopped by my desk and asked how it all went. I told her the truth, guilty plea, probation, counseling, and the no-contact order. She nodded like she'd been holding her breath for me. Good, she said. You've handled this better than most people ever could. Then she smiled. By the way, I'm recommending you for a promotion next cycle. You earned it. The words barely registered at first. For so long, I'd associated achievement with my mother's interference, her edits, her phone calls, her fixing. This was different. This was mine. Therapy with Heather continued every week. We talked about how guilt and relief could coexist, how part of me still felt like a bad daughter, even though I knew I wasn't. Heather said, That's the conditioning talking. Guilt is the chain she left behind. You don't have to wear it. She asked what safety felt like. I couldn't answer right away, but over the next few months I started to learn. Safety was making coffee in the morning without checking my phone for angry messages. Safety was choosing a new apartment without asking anyone's opinion. Safety was laughing with Bianca from work without worrying that someone would ruin it. The next probation review came 6 months later. Violet emailed me a copy of the therapist's report. My mother was attending sessions, but still couldn't see the full pattern of her behavior. She admitted the interview incident was a mistake, but framed it as trying too hard to help. Progress, technically, but shallow. When the judge asked if I wanted to modify the no-contact order to allow communication through therapists, I didn't hesitate. No, I said. I'm not ready. The order was extended for another year. After court, I walked outside into crisp autumn air. For once, I didn't look over my shoulder expecting to see her. I just walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel, breathing. That weekend, I moved into my new apartment. A small one-bedroom with big windows and sunlight that spilled across the floor. When I shut the door behind me, I realized something profound. She didn't know where I lived. No one had ever had that power over her before. I lit a candle, made tea, and sat by the window watching the city lights blink on. For years, I thought freedom would feel loud, like victory, like shouting, but it didn't. It felt like this, quiet, steady mine.